morning from a very windy day here in Avalon.
It's so windy.
On Finding Avalon.
Yeah.
Because of this whole ISO crapo thing that everyone's having to go through, we thought we would make some little goodies for you to keep you entertained while you're doing God knows what, or God knows nothing.
Some of these videos as well are just like super overdue. They're just our most asked questions. So
We've been meaning to make this video for years.
Well,
Feels
I don't know
like
about years, but
months,
definitely months. So we thought we would make a video today about, I guess, renewable energy and power on the boat, and just run through what we found has worked, how much we use, what we use, what we would change, and yeah, you know, hopefully it gives you some good ideas about your boat, how you can change it, what you're looking for, and also just the differences between sort of anchoring versus on passage, opposed to different parts of the world, and kind of tailoring it to that.
And if you're asking who the hell are you and why the flip are you so qualified to record this video, well, I'm Xanthe,
I'm Jackson.
Captain Jackson, and we've been sailing around the world on this tiny little boat for 2 years, and we started in Croatia, we're now at home in Australia, and we really stuffed up a few things and we nailed a few things too. So we thought we're by no means experts, we just thought we'd share with you our experience. We just wanted to go on a little sail today. We haven't really done anything today, we've just been lolling around, sort of eating chocolate and not doing much. So yeah, we're just gonna up sticks and just go across the bay to a place called Morning Bay. Is that where we're going?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we've never actually been there before on our own boat, so you have, haven't you? You're looking at me like
I haven't. No, I haven't.
He's a local, I'm a pom. So it's just across the way. It's going to be a really short sail because we're only allowed half an hour.
And it is blowing a westerly, so it's going to be perfect.
Yeah, we're going to be sailing on the beam, and Avalon loves sailing on the beam, so let's go. Yeah.
You need to get in your dinghy and come out and surf this.
This is living.
Her name is Anaesthesia. You know she'll try to sleep with your best friend. You know she'll try to please you.
So we're sailing with just the jib out today. As we mentioned, it's pretty windy, and we're just going over there because we're only allowed out sailing for half an hour, so just making it short and sweet. Fortunately, we don't have electric winches, so hoisting the main's usually quite an ordeal. But this is lovely. This is all we need.
She goes tiptoe. She goes tiptoe.
Coming in 3, 2, 1, and here it is now.
When Jackson's racing yachts, his position is the bowman, so he's always on to this whole wind thing. So whenever there's a gust or a buster coming through, straight onto it.
It turns out though that most sailors are into the whole wind thing.
Oh, there's a buster coming through!
Yeah.
There actually is!
It's all in your head.
So here we are having a beer with you for a chat. The captain of the ship is going to walk you through the power systems on the boat, what we did great, what we did shit, and what our ideal setup would be.
Most boats are a 12 volt, 24 volt or 48 volt system. In your house, at least in Australia, you've got 240 volt power, which runs all your electricity, right? But on the boat it's 12 volt, which is the same as your car. If we just start really simply there, all of our electronics on board and all that is electronics that is made and pieces of equipment that are made for 12 volt systems. When we say 12 volt, it's because you generally have 12 volt batteries. And I guess the whole goal of this is storing power, using power, and then being able to replenish that power. on a boat like ours, we have power to run our fridges, our water pumps, bilge pumps, lights, nav lights, navigation equipment, which includes like autopilot, stuff like that, a windlass. On top of that, we also use a lot of power for our laptops. So that's one bit where we now need to change our 12 volt power into 240 volt power or DC to AC power. Now the one thing you have to consider is what your power consumption is. And it took us a little while to work that out, but you mostly calculate this in amp hours. An amp hour is like a unit of energy within a battery, and is all your equipment also uses a certain amount of energy per hour. We've got 4 batteries on board. When we bought Avalon, we had 2 batteries, and each of those batteries were 90 amp hours. So we had 180 amp hours, and we upgraded that to 420 amp hours. So each of our batteries are 105 amp hours. On a normal day, when we add in our fridge, our water pump, our lights, and we're talking an anchor, so fridge, water pump, lights, what else do we use at anchor? USB, like 12 volt for fans and
phones.
Yeah, to charge that.
That's it.
On an average day, we'll use about 80 amps. On top of that, we're charging our laptops. We're probably using about 120 to 140 amps. For our system, where we have 420 amps, we're using around about 30%, which is quite good, because here's the other difference between, there's a whole bunch of different battery types, and I'm not going to get into them, but I'm just going to say we have lead acid batteries. An average day, you don't want to discharge them more than 65%, because then they'll start to deplete and you start to really lose their capacity.
A la what happened to us in the flipping BVIs. We lost a couple of weeks of joy there, but that's it.
Yeah. So that's just a summary. I mean, there's really great technology out there, particularly the lithium technology, which I think we'll get to later as to what we would prefer. As a battery setup, lithium is great because out of that box, out of that battery and its capacity, you can use 100%, recharge at 100%, and it recharges a lot faster. Whereas lead acid is way more finicky. Out of your 100%, you can only ever really use, say, 30 to 40% of that capacity. And then it has to go through quite particular charging sequence to get it back to 100%. And that's another thing that we've kind of learned, is like the recharging of the batteries after they've been depleted.
Why do we have lead acid batteries?
Yeah, so we went lead acid simply because of cost.
We're stingy sailors.
There's one part that's us being stingy, but then also us knowing that we're probably not going to be on board full time for like 5 or 10 years. And so 2 years ago, lithium was probably 4 to 5 times the cost.
Yeah.
I couldn't justify at the time.
And back in the time when we were so naive to think that we wouldn't want to keep doing this.
Yeah. When we were buying them, we're like, oh, just going to sail for like a year and a half.
Yeah,
so
then we'll be over it, we're sure.
You should definitely get enough life out of your lead acid batteries for that kind of time. Okay, so let's talk about the system we have, because this is also a bit more context. So with your lead acid batteries, they go through 3 stages of charging. The first stage is what they call bulk absorption. So you're basically putting as much power and energy back into those batteries as you can. Now, normally what will happen is that capacity will reach, say, 85%. Once it gets that, it then goes into an absorption phase, which means that the voltage that you're charging them at goes higher, because it gets harder to get that energy back into the battery. So for our solar, we will be charging them at the bulk phase 13.8, 14 volts. And then for the absorption, which is that last little bit on top, they're charged at like 14.8 volts. And then that gets it all back in, it stops sulfication. And then once they're fully charged and that all the capacity's gone back in, they go to a float stage, which just means they stay topped up for the rest of the day. So that's capacity. So as I said, we've got 420 amp hours of capacity. We normally use about 100 to 150 amps per day. and then you've got to recharge your batteries. And this is all at anchor. It definitely, we use a lot more while we're on passage, but we'll talk about that after. So while we're at anchor, our primary method of recharging our system is via solar. Three main options you have is solar, wind, and hydro. Obviously at anchor, hydro doesn't work because you're not moving. Wind is awesome, but you need wind, and obviously what?
That little guy's, his wind is going.
Oh yeah, his little wind. Yeah.
But that's really rare when you're at anchor, because usually when you're at anchor, you're choosing the least windy spot. So you're tucking into a bay that hopefully has, you know, less than 10 knots of wind. Yeah,
each has their own pros and cons. I think as a whole, for bang for your buck, solar is the best. The other important part of this is, like, when you invest in your solar panels, you also need to invest in a solar controller. We went for a Victron MPPT controller, and I think that's an awesome part of kit. Awesome.
I just love it. Sorry, I love how much you love that thing.
Yeah, it's just an awesome piece of kit. Like,
he checks it every 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's so good. Where's my phone? Oh, I don't have my phone.
I'll get it. Catch.
This is our solar controller, and you can see right now we've got 11 watts of power, but that is at 6 o'clock. But the sun's pretty low now, so that's all right. But most importantly, like, you can go here to our history. So you can see here that today the maximum battery power that we got to was 14.74, which is really good. You can see how much power we got, and then you can kind of see our averages. So because the boat's been on anchor recently, it's kind of just been pretty low each day. But you can see, like, when we were actually using the boat last week, we got quite a lot of power out of that. We got 780 watt hours. 780 divided by 12 was 65 amp hours. And the most we've had out of our solar system was 1.3 kilowatts. So is pretty much bang on what we use. And the bonus about having an MPPT controller is that it regulates the charge a lot better, and it can convert 36 volt panels, 24 volt panels, 12 volt panels down into your system, and it just turns that extra power into more amps. So the next point is what we've been talking about so far is anchor, and the next thing to consider is on passage.
Whole different ball game, different boat.
Yeah, it's really different, and we didn't probably get the full extent of it until we did the Atlantic, when we actually, like, when fuel consumption was a really big target for us on, like, reducing fuel, and that we're in the trade winds, so we're doing a lot more sailing and not having to motor. What we found was, I reckon on passage, our consumption in 24 hours goes from like 120 up to probably 180, 200. What's the massive difference? The first one is that you're running all of your electronics a lot more.
The nav gear's on 24/7.
Yep.
The autopilot is on a fair bit.
The boat is going 24/7. You've got people using water pumps, you've got people using nav gear, you've got people using lights, like all that stuff.
For a month.
Yeah, because, well, I mean, you know, you're doing that for 20 days. The other thing is that as you're sailing and the boat's like rocking and you're in the swell, and depending what angle you're doing, you're probably not getting the best solar absorption anyway, because you've got things overshadowing it. And so your energy production is pretty crap for us, for solar. And from what we've heard, wind is also somewhat inefficient while under sail, because generally if you're rolling around a little bit, it kind of swings around and goes off axis and stops spinning, and if you're going downwind like we are a lot of the time, they don't really work. But hydropower would be awesome.
Awesome. I really want one.
So that leads us on to like what actually started to work really well, and it took us it took us like a year to work out, or 6 months to work out. It took us 6 months to work out the ideal system.
Which I think is quite good.
Yeah, which
6 months not bad, hey?
yeah, which for us on our 38 footer with the two of us, especially at anchor, our system is great. The first thing was probably our battery bank sizing. I think we actually got that kind of right for our consumption. I think our battery monitor was an awesome investment for me. I really like it, but that's
yeah. The battery monitor is in the starboard aft cabin. Jackson begged me to make the port aft cabin the guest room, even though it wasn't what I wanted it to be, because it's near the kitchen and everything, because he wants 24/7 access to the battery monitor. Starboard aft cabin is off limits so that Jackson can go in there periodically and check how the batteries are doing.
great. I think just as a piece of equipment, I think it's a really worthwhile investment. It tracks how much you've used, it gives you the real-time data, and you can also test pieces of equipment. So you can turn the fridge on and it'll instantly tell you that fridge is using 7 amp hours. It'll also tell you turn your nav gear on and tells you how much that's using. It'll tell you how much autopilot's using. So
you can get really geeky with it.
yeah, I think in terms of studying and understanding your system, it was an awesome piece of equipment. Second piece of equipment that we got right was the solar regulator and the solar charger. I think it is really efficient. It does a really great job of charging the batteries, and I like that it has the Bluetooth app, because again, it's really good to track your charging, to see where you're up to, and to see what stages it's gone through. What else we got right is the rigid solar panel. I think that was a really good investment, and second time round I'll get 2 of them.
Definitely. Our Tahitian king up there. I love you.
The cool thing about Tahiti was that they had a lot of like government subsidies for renewable energy, and so their solar panels were actually really cheap. So we ended up going for a rigid solar panel, which is like 320 watts but at 36 volts, and this thing has been a beast. It's changed our lives for sure.
We love him.
Yeah, it's just been such a game changer. It so comfortably covers all our needs. At its maximum, like our solar controller maxes out at 30 amps, and there's been multiple times that I've been checking and it's like pumping out 30 amps.
And Jackson did such a good job of bolting the thing to the bimini. I mean, I was really skeptical about the whole thing when he said he was going to do that. I was like, I'm not going to have a part in this. But I ate my words.
Finally, the last piece of equipment that has made a real difference to us was getting an external regulator for our alternator on our engine. Without going too geeky on it, your engine has an alternator on it, which most alternators are there for the purpose of charging your starter battery. And so because your starter battery only uses a really tiny amount to get your engine started, it normally puts a small amount back in, but it only charges it to 14 volts. And on the back of your alternator, it's got an internal regulator, and it will tap out at 14 volts. So once your batteries reach 14 volts, it will stop producing power. But when you're trying to get that last 10%, as I told before, where you're trying to get it from the bulk stage to the absorption phase, you need to be getting your batteries up to like 14.8 volts. And so your alternator won't do it. It's not that it can't do it, but it just won't. So what you can put in is called an external regulator, and it sits between alternator and battery. And it tricks the alternator into saying, oh, the batteries aren't charged, and therefore we'll charge them to 14.8 volts. So it controls it. It gets way more efficiency out of it, because as your alternator is approaching 14 volts, it starts to really taper out. And so to get from say 13.9 to 14 volts could take you an hour, which is a really long time. You're burning a lot of fuel to get a really small amount of energy. But the external regulator manages that and makes the whole process really efficient. When we were previously charging the batteries off the engine, we'd probably be running the engine for 3 hours to get it to 14 volts. Whereas with the external regulator, we're running it for probably an hour 20 to getting it 14.8 fully charged to float, like done and dusted. So I think those are the things we got right.
Yeah. High five.
So, the things we got wrong.
What did we stuff up?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we stuffed up was
Those stupid flexible solar panels.
was
that
investing in flexible solar
We thought they were
panels.
the coolest thing ever when we got them as
Yeah.
well. We were like, oh, look at that.
We firstly started with buying flexible solar panels. So the thing is that you also need to invest in the structure of these.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
the one thing that we didn't want to do was invest in solar, but then also have to invest in this massive big solar rig off the back with davits and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
People always ask why we don't have that, and we're like, you got to spare $5,000 to lend us, or what?
Yeah.
Those things are expensive.
Yeah. We decided we'd go for flexible solar panels that we could basically strap to the top of our bimini. And we bought 440 watts. And they were 12-volt panels. And they were actually really great. Like, for the first 5 months, they were really, really good.
Yeah.
It meant we didn't have to invest in the solar rig. They went straight on. We could strap them down. And in, like, really windy conditions, we could just take them off. When we bought those flexible solar panels, it was awesome. They were doing really great. But what we found was that probably 5 months in,
All turned to shit.
their output really started to degrade. When we first installed them, we were quite comfortably out of our 410 watts or 420 watts, whatever it was. We were getting up to about like 380 watts at some point in the full sun. Like, it was doing really well. And by the end of it, after 5 months, I reckon our maximum output was maybe 190 to 200 watts, like maximum. What that actually ended up leading to was our new battery bank also dying prematurely, because essentially the solar just wasn't powerful enough to recharge our battery bank. It wasn't able to put in enough power and then also get the absorption phase. So what we found ourselves having to do was run the engine a lot more.
Really destroys the serenity, guys.
Yeah.
It's not what we're
Which-
here for.
It does destroy the serenity a little bit, but I guess that's the other part. Like, you've either got the options for renewable energy or combustion and burning fuel. So obviously on our engine, we've got an alternator and we can charge our batteries from that alternator. And obviously a lot of people also opt for a generator,
Yeah.
which I think a generator is a good piece of equipment. But it's something, again, we opted not to have. I
They're
think
bulky and they're stinky and they're unsightly and they're, you know, it's not renewable energy.
at the end of the day, we would love to burn the least amount of fuel possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of put us in the Caribbean in a really tough situation where our solar wasn't performing. We were having to run the engine a lot more to charge. And it actually destroyed our first bank of batteries. Yeah, we've gone to Deca batteries now, and that was just because that's what we could get in Panama.
Yeah, there were only 2 brands that we could choose from. Like, kind of, we wanted to go mid to high range, and there was only really Deca and Trojan to choose from. And in the end, we just chose Deca because they were the ones that fit down there better. This is the only thing I know about because I was the one that went to the battery shop.
Oh yeah,
So, like,
because you could speak Spanish.
I'm quite literate in the battery category of the Spanish
Yeah.
language, which is great.
Yeah, you did really
Never
well.
know when that might come in handy.
Yeah, you did so well.
Sí, batería, por favor.
But by the time we got to Tahiti, our solar panels were like shot. I think they might have their time and place, but I just don't think
Not on a boat.
I just don't think they work on a boat unless they're like properly maybe strapped, and you just got to get good quality ones. Like, you pay what you get for.
I think just not on a boat that regularly goes out in 20 knots of breeze, you know?
Yeah. It's just not a good long-term option.
Nah.
With that, we also just didn't really understand how to properly charge your lead acid batteries and how to control that charge. And I think that is one of our bigger mistakes, was a failing solar system combined with not really understanding how to properly charge those batteries led to them prematurely failing. And I'd also say the thing that we also stuffed up was understanding how much extra power we used on passage and how inefficient the solar gets. Basically, we couldn't get through the night. Like, we could charge our system through the day, but there's no way we could get through the night without them dropping to below 60%. So we were having to charge our batteries via engine at least twice a day.
And running the engine on passage isn't ideal because A, you feel like you're cheating, and B, the poor bastards in the aft cabin have to sleep next to the engine, and it gets really hot and noisy.
Yeah. Also, you're burning fuel, and like
fuel.
It feels really wrong to be burning fuel when you're sailing fast.
Yeah.
Like that's the biggest problem. Like, it just feels wrong. So I think understanding our power usage on passage, and that would probably really prompt us to go for hydro. The final mistake that we made is that I think that we budgeted all our power and everything on ideal scenarios. So it's like, yes, we use 100 to 150 amps. Yes, our solar panel can pump that back in. But as soon as you have like one cloudy day, 2 cloudy days, all of a sudden our system gets out of whack. Like, all of a sudden we have to change what we do.
Yeah, like that week in the Tuamotus when it rained. It rained non-stop for 2 weeks in the Tuamotus. And yeah, our power went.
It was at the end of our flexible solar panels really dying. We were running the engine a lot. We just weren't able to charge them. I don't think they got a full charge for like 5 days.
No.
Almost, if you can, like, kind of double your capacity, because I think that would be a really great thing. Because in ideal conditions, we're sweet, but as soon as those ideal conditions are not ideal, it's like we start to suffer a bit.
Yeah.
So after, I guess, 2 years of sailing, learning all this, failing a fair bit,
got a pretty good idea of our dream system.
Yeah, with budgets aside and just thinking about quality of life and whatever else, I think our dream system would be, I'd firstly start with lithium batteries.
Lithium batteries, yeah.
I think as a technology, they're really awesome. You can carry half the amount of batteries, but I like that you can discharge them all the way through and then charge them up really rapidly. Like, they charge a lot faster, so whatever you're using to charge becomes more efficient. So I think we need a battery bank that has a capacity of 200 usable amp hours. So that's almost kind of doubling what we have now. So if we're talking lead acid, I would be saying that we need to have more like, say, 600 amp hours. I think I would still definitely stick with solar. I think in an ideal world you'd have 700 to 1000 watts. And I think the MPPT controller is just an awesome piece of equipment that will just charge that setup really comfortably. But you've got to match your solar capacity to how much you're using. I probably wouldn't worry about a wind generator. It's a nice to have, but again, I don't think it's a necessity, but I would definitely opt for the hydro.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you're a couple like us who sail a fair bit, then you get your mileage out of that for sure.
I think the backup to the wind generator is just then having the alternator regulator, like the external regulator. Like, that's your backup system.
Well, thanks for joining us and having a little looky into how we deal with power on this boat.
Pretty nerdy video.
Pretty nerdy video, but those ones always get all the hits. I don't know why.
Yeah.
If that was useful to you, please give it a big like, comment down below, and definitely subscribe. Look, we've got a bit of time on our hands and we're guessing so have you, so go crazy, let us know in the comments section below what you'd like to see.
And if you've got some questions about this and about power, because it is a really big topic, I know it's kind of a broad brush approach of what we've just done now, shoot us a message on any of our socials or on YouTube as well. We'd love to answer them and engage with you.
Hope you're all keeping safe, hope you're all keeping well and clean and socially distant. Lots of love.
See you guys.